Welcome into the Weather Wednesday podcast here at New England Storm Center, the first Weather Wednesday of the new spring season. And to celebrate that, we are going to be talking about nothing but winter today. That's just how it worked out here this week. So we're going to start off. We do have a winter storm coming in this weekend. It won't be wintry for everyone, but for some people, for some areas of New England, they will be getting a thump of springtime snow. So we're going to give a quick update on that storm, what we know right now here midweek. We are then going to get into the top 5 weather-defining moments of this past winter for New England. I posted that on newenglandstormcenter.com. We're going to go over it here on the podcast today. So let's get right into it. Again, a quick update here on this weekend storm. There is a storm coming tomorrow, too. New England is entering a hyperactive pattern. There's going to be several chances for precipitation over the next couple weeks. So we do have a quick storm tomorrow, but the much bigger impact will be coming in over the weekend. So let's jump into the top 5 weather-defining moments of the 2022 to 2023 winter. Again, I posted this on newenglandstormcenter.com earlier in the week. Coming in at number 5, I put what I called Cold, Dark Christmas, Warm New Year's. And in all honesty, I really included this to make it in a top 5. I separated it from the big storm that we had right before Christmas, and that will be coming up later on. But here at number 5, I put the Arctic cold front that came through at the tail end of that storm that gave many parts of New England their coldest Christmas in years, in some places decades. Boston's low temperature on Christmas Eve was the lowest it had been on Christmas Eve in 33 years. A lot of cities around New England experienced this, their coldest Christmas Eve, their coldest Christmas Day in decades. That was set up, of course, by this Arctic front that brought near hurricane force wind gusts. The Arctic front brought much stronger gusts than initially forecast, really, as that was coming through. We thought we had seen the majority of the power outages. There had already been over 300,000 outages across New England from the storm during the day. And then this Arctic front came through, knocked out a lot more power, and some utility companies said that in the 90-minute span that the cold front came through, their power outage numbers tripled that evening. And that continued through, the outages from that storm, of course, continued right through Christmas weekend. There were still well over 200,000 customers without power for Christmas Eve, right through Christmas Day. So it was cold, it was dark Christmas for many New Englanders this year. So coming in at number 4, I labeled it the Late January Storm Train. So as I'm sure you all know, one of the biggest weather stories of this winter as a whole has been the nonstop battering of California, the near nonstop battering of California all season long. They did get a break in mid to late January when a major pattern flip happened. When that pattern flip happened, it temporarily shut off the atmospheric rivers slamming California, but it did redirect a lot of that moisture across the country right into New England. Of course, what New England got, nothing like the atmospheric rivers that California got, but we did have a span of 3 storms striking in less than 1 week. These were 3 very messy storms. So the first of these storms came in January 19th to the 20th. This was the weakest and the least impactful of this trio of storms. But just 2 days later, storm number 2 came in, dumped over a foot of snow in places of New England. And in this mild winter, temperatures were marginal. It was the very heavy, wet snow, as most of the snow was this season. Caused widespread tree damage, especially across northern New England. There were over 100,000 customers lost power during this storm. It also caused some pretty decent coastal flooding along the Massachusetts coastline. Storm number 3 came in not even 48 hours later, dumping another foot of heavy, wet snow across many of the same areas that it struck before. Not all the power outages from storm number 2 had been restored when this third storm came in, causing more problems. This storm was milder than the previous two. A lot of southern New England saw rain. They saw torrential rain. The south shore of Massachusetts and Rhode Island in particular saw 2+ inches of rain that caused a few rivers to flood. Flood warnings were in effect for a couple of days after the event for some rivers in the South Shore and in Rhode Island. So coming in at number 3, I labeled it on the site as, I just called it the pre-Christmas cyclone that struck, of course, December 22nd and 23rd. So in America as a whole, it was really impressive, and I'll put the alerts up. Almost the entire country was covered in weather alerts as it related to this storm on December 23rd, including large areas of blizzard warnings. This storm has been dubbed the blizzard of the century for New York. Over 100 people across the country were killed. It caused over $5 billion in damage. 7 million customers across the United States lost power in this storm, including 400,000 plus in New England. Here in New England, storm certainly was not a blizzard, that's for sure. It was more hurricane-like than blizzard-like. Here, several inches of windswept rain fell, massive tree damage. There was even some structural damage. I know a container got blown over onto a pickup truck in Massachusetts. There was historic coastal flooding. There was very severe coastal flooding across the entire New England coast, but it was especially severe and historic across northern New England, New Hampshire, and Maine. Portland experienced its 4th highest tide ever. Of course, there are many dramatic photos that came out of this storm. Of course, you had the picture of Wells, Maine, completely covered in sea foam. Massive, massive waves pounding the shoreline. Just very dramatic storm. This storm earned a spot alongside New England's other legendary storms and nor'easters. This storm was not a nor'easter, but definitely earns a place alongside New England's legendary storms. Many of them were nor'easters. So coming in at number 2 is what I called the early February Arctic blast. And I wrote that it really seems only fitting that in this winter that has been mostly dominated by a mild weather pattern, that we got our most severe Arctic blast that we have seen in years. Even if it did only last 2 days, really, not even any more than 48 hours it lasted, but it was severe. The coldest wind chill that came in a populated place was -61 in Frenchville, Maine. Now, right before the Arctic blast came in, my final forecast wind chill map, I drew a -60s zone on it, which I really couldn't believe I was doing for New England. This really was just about as cold as it gets here in New England. There was that ground blizzard in Maine. Again, another very rare occurrence in New England. Northern Maine experienced a ground blizzard. There was the steam devils on Lake Champlain. A lot of sea smoke rising across the Atlantic and Lake Winnipesaukee. There's some very interesting things that happened during this Arctic blast. Boston saw a -10-degree air temperature, which was the coldest air temperature Boston had seen in over 6 decades, 66 years. It had been since Boston saw a double-digit negative air temperature. And of course, Mount Washington hit a low of -47, came within 3 degrees of New Hampshire's all-time low temperature record of -50, which occurred in 1885. That record stood. Record that did not stand was America's all-time lowest wind chill reading of Mount Washington at negative 108 degrees for a wind chill. That is likely the coldest wind chill ever recorded in the United States. There is no official record kept of wind chill, so it is unofficial, but that is the coldest that anywhere in the United States has reported a wind chill. But like I said, it did not last long. We started below zero on that Sunday morning. By Sunday afternoon, we were up into the 40s and 50s above zero. So short, but certainly severe and very interesting. So as soon as that happened, I thought for sure this was destined to be the number one on the weather-defining moments list. Of course, that was dethroned in mid-March with what is coming in at number one, the Great Nor'easter of 2023, March 13th to the 15th. We went in detail about this storm in last week's episode, so I won't go too deep into it, but 42 inches was the maximum recorded snowfall. It was in Reedsboro, Vermont. That landed it at third place in the New England Snowstorm Hall of Fame, behind the Great White Hurricane of 1888 at 50 inches, the Great Nor'easter of 2020 at 48 inches, again this one, Great Nor'easter of 2023, sitting at 42 inches at number 3, and then the top 5 is rounded out with a tie between the blizzard of 78, the blizzard of 2013, each putting up 40 inches of snow. Again, another widespread power outage event. We had a few of these power outage events, again, with this wet, heavy snow that is expected. We peaked with over 215,000 customers without power across New England from this storm. This storm also caused minor coastal flooding. It could have been a lot worse. Fortunately, astronomical high tides. It did not align with the astronomical high tides, or else this would have been a major coastal flooding event. Fortunately, that did not happen. But that is the top 5 weather-defining moments, really the weather-defining events of New England's 2022 to 2023 winter season. It wasn't quite as harsh as other winters we've had. Again, a majority of it we were mild and above average and snow-free. Of course, that of course all changed in mid-March. But there you have it. So again, just to recap the top 5, number 5, the cold, dark Christmas. Number 4, the late January storm train. Number 3, the pre-Christmas cyclone. Number 2, the early February Arctic blast. And number 1, the Great Nor'easter of 2023. And that's going to do it for this episode of Weather Wednesday. This is really a celebration of this past winter season here in New England, here on the first Weather Wednesday of the spring. So thank you for listening,